Last week's scripture readings begin with Moses going back up Mount Sinai to receive a duplicate copy of the Ten Commandments. Last week we spent some time sorting these commandments into three basic categories: rules against immorality, rules against idolatry, and rules against injustice. According to Merriam-Webster, immorality is something that conflicts with generally held moral principles. Idolatry is worship of a physical object as a god, and injustice is the violation of the rights of another. While we probably have a pretty good idea of what immorality is and how it can serve us in our lives, idolatry and injustice are a little bit trickier. We tend to think of idolatry as the creation of a golden statue that we bow down to, which seems like a non-issue. But if instead we look at idolatry as anything that we put ahead of God in our lives, it suddenly hits a little bit closer to home. And while we live with such ease and plenty, when the world around us faces oppression, war, homelessness, and starvation, it's hard to argue that we aren't somehow complicit in an unjust system. We might want to write this week's scripture readings off as cultural and no longer applicable to our lives, but we probably shouldn't. 2 Timothy 3:16 tells us that all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. Certainly, Exodus chapters 34 and 35 offer many valuable lessons. God teaches us to remember His work and provision in our lives. He commands us to rest in His presence and to approach Him in worship at regular intervals. He asks that we bring Him the first and best of who we are, and He warns us against the corrupting influence of surrounding culture. Throughout history, God's people have always been enticed by surrounding culture, and often they're drawn away from Him. But in each generation, prophets have risen up to call the people back to the heart of God. This week's readings come from the book of 1 Kings. They are part of the historical account of the life of Elijah, a prophet who served during the reign of King Ahab. God enabled Elijah to clearly see the danger facing his people, and gave Elijah the boldness to step in on their behalf. As with any illness, the first step toward healing is simply to recognize the symptoms. But sometimes our symptoms come on so gradually that we need help recognizing them. We need an Elijah, someone who will hold up what health looks like in one hand while holding up a mirror in front of us with the other.